G'day all, King Brown here again, and going to be doing a video today on the anatomy of a camp oven, pointing out all the different parts and what they're called and what they do. And but before we get going, you might notice that I'm wearing a very colourful shirt. Well, I've been receiving a lot of messages lately on the last couple of videos I did on the loudness of the shirts, and I thought they're not really that loud. I'll show you what loud is. So the sole reason I've been doing that is I've actually been on a bit of a lifestyle change the last couple of months, and I've been on the carnivore diet, and you can look that up and on here on YouTube. And yeah, a couple of months down the track, it's very, very interesting, the results. I have lost, I don't know how much weight, but I'm pretty much buying new shirts all the time because the other ones just become big sacks that don't fit. So yeah, I just buy a nice new colourful shirt and to stand in front of you guys and talk about camp ovens. But anyway, here we go. A camp oven. This is we're talking old vintage collectible camp ovens here, not the modern day Asian made camp ovens. Similar rules apply. And but we'll start with the lid. Now the lid, pretty much simple. It's called a lid. Okay, this part up on here, that's called the handle. Okay, the lid handle is on the lid. This bit down here, and this is just made out of wire. Some of them are made out of steel rod. They have all different types. So this bit down here, it's actually called the bail. It's not called the handle. The handle is on the lid. The bail is on the base. Okay, so we got lid handle, bail. Now, on the base, well, this is obviously the base. Now, on the base, we have ears. Okay, now the old style ears generally look like this. They're been handcrafted and put on after the base was cast. And you can usually see that clearly that they've been attached to the base when it was after it was cast. If this was an Asian made oven, it wouldn't have that. It would just have a bit for the bail that was part of the oven because they cast it in one hit. They just have a mold, pour it all in, and it's done. But the old days, they didn't do that. They handmade the bases, and then they attached the ears and the legs after it was made. Okay, and the lid handle, that was always attached after it was made. It's not poured as part of the pot. Okay, so that's how you tell craftsmanship done by hand. Okay, they don't do that over there in Asia these days. It's just a factory production line. Pump out as many as we can, as cheap as we can. That's all that matters. It didn't matter about the craftsmanship over there. The old days it did. So they had reputations, they had competition with other foundries. They had to make an oven that stood out, that was going to last, and that was practical. Okay, so now that brings us to the legs. They're on the base. And the camp ovens would have legs in the day. They had a purpose for standing proud of the coals and supporting, mainly in the stone fireplaces. Sitting them out in the bush on the dirt, legs don't really hold up much. They don't really offer any assistance or, you know, increase the ability to cook. You know, they could be there or not there, really. A lot of the legs were chopped off later on in life of the ovens, when, especially the older ones, when combustion stoves came in and would become more available in the general households. They would take the legs off so that they would have no legs on the oven. They could sit them on the flat hot plates and cook a stew or whatever on the combustion stoves. But anyway, they are called the legs. Some people call them feet, but yeah, I've always known them as legs. And if you look down in the centre here, you might see a blemish there, and we'll have a look at the other one as well. I'll get some close-ups of that. There's a round lump. Some of them are quite smooth and some of them are fairly flat, hard to see. Some of them are very, very pronounced lumps. They've all got one name, and they're called a sprue. Now the sprue is actually where, yeah, this one here is a bit more easy to see. I'll just tip him over, but the sprue is where the attachment was, where they poured in the metal into the mould. Okay, so that was the sprue. Now that sprue's type of casting happened, I think, from what I've read years ago. I'm from memory. I'm going on memory here too, so don't hold me to these dates. But I think It might have been around the 1900 mark, maybe 1910. The sprue became the general way of doing things. Maybe earlier than that. I might be out. I could be out by 100 years. I don't really know. I can't remember. I do remember reading years ago, many years ago, about the sprue, because originally they would have what was called a gate mark, and that was a separate way of doing it. And they're distinct by having two lines, raised lines, and that was where, well, I guess where it was poured in. I don't know if it was poured in with our air vents or what it was. A different method, anyway, of casting the bases. These days it's always done with a sprue. Well, not that they do many camp ovens these days, but yeah. So that's the sprue mark, and keep an eye out for that. Some ovens have a very pronounced one, some don't. What else can I tell you about the ovens? Oh yeah, some ovens will have, and this one does on the front, he'll have a brand. Now, a marking is called a brand. If it doesn't have a marking, if the camp oven does no marking at all on it, we call that a clean skin. Okay. And by the way, when you get those camp ovens that have had the legs chopped off them, we call them an amputee. Okay, so that's an amputee oven, and they're still collectible, as I guess, but they have a way less value to a collector. Way less value. Now, a nice clear stamp or maker's mark, that's the brand of the oven. That tells you the brand of the oven. So yeah, it's called a maker's mark, a stamp, or a brand. And this one here is clearly on the base here. That means it's an Albion camp oven. Even if we couldn't read that, we would know, just if we could see that circle there and some smudgy marks in the middle, we would actually know that was an Albion camp oven, because they were the only ones that put a mark there like that. Okay, so it's not all about having to be able to read what's on there. It's where it is on the oven. Another instance of that is this oven here is actually a Metters oven. Now, any Metters oven, some of them actually had a mark, Metters, on the base. They did that for a period of time, I think in the early days. I don't think they did it very long, or you don't see a lot of them around with the mark on the base. But they always have a mark on the rim. It'll say Metters. Sometimes this one says Metters gap 12. So it's a Metters 12 inch. So yeah, there will always be a mark there on that very edge of the rim of the lid. And if you see anything there, even if you can't make out what it says, it just means it's a Metters. Okay, so we use different marks and even smudges. You can see something was there, but it's all worn away. Where it is going to help us identify what that camp oven is. Simpson will have a little square, I just thought, a little rectangle type of a badge, and it could be under the lid handle, like that. It could be like under the lid handle there. It could be off to one side. Yes, but if you could see that little triangle, that little rectangle shape, and it's too faint to read, pretty much tells us that's a Simpson camp oven. So anyway, shapes of legs will tell us a lot. The shapes of ears, the lengths of the legs can tell us a lot. People send photos of this camp oven and it's a distant thing, or, you know, here's my camp oven. They go, yeah, but we need the details. We need to see photos of the legs. What shape are they? How long are they? We need to see the ears. We need to see the lid handles. We need to see any markings. We need to see the height and shape of the dome. That tells us a lot. It eliminates a lot. If you saw that on an oven, you'd know straight away that that lid is not sitting on, or unless it's a mismatch, but that lid is not a Metters lid. Because if you look at a Metters lid in comparison, they don't have a real big high dome. They have a small dome. This is an Albion. Albions have a very pronounced dome. Metters are known as having a much flatter lid. And the bigger the oven, the flatter that lid looks. Whereas the bigger the Albion, the bigger the dome. So even the shape of that can tell us. So we want to see profile shots, ear shots, leg shots, lid handles, markings, stuff like that can actually identify. We can use it to narrow down what it is and it isn't in a camp oven, and maybe I'll tell you what's actually going on. As far as the age, it's always the first question people ask me: how old is this oven? I want to know how old it is. Well, honestly, who cares? The age has absolutely nothing to do with the value How it cooks or anything else, it's old. That's all you need to know. It's no one really cares. Okay, they didn't keep records. They didn't go, okay, we pumped out a batch. We'll record this. We pumped out a batch of camp ovens in 1906 on August. It wasn't done like that. What they would be doing, I mean, some of these foundries were full-on. Metters were a big foundry. They made a lot of stuff, had a lot of things going on at the time. They employed a lot of people. Massive foundry. They were very full on it. But yeah, in more recent times, the smaller foundries like the I'm just trying to think, like even the Hardings and the Furpies, they weren't making camp ovens as a business. That's not what they did. They actually were a foundry that did foundry stuff. The camp ovens were probably done on a day when they were a bit low on work, or they had a bit of a moment spare time, and they looked down and the camp oven stock's getting a bit low, so they're like, okay, let's get the boys to whip out a few more camp ovens and keep our stocks up over there. We're getting a bit down. And no one cared, when about marking dates or when they were made or anything like that. It didn't matter, and it doesn't matter now. A brand, if you own a brand, say Metters, okay, you've got a camp oven that might be up to 100 years old. If you've got an Albion, it's over 100 years old straight away. How old exactly? There's no way of telling that. If you own a Karen, it could be 250 years old. Who knows? Those things were made a long time ago, about 300 years ago. That Karen foundry started. So, yeah, it could be any age. I get the same questions with the age on the boilers and on the fountains, and people seem to be determined. Like, I need to know how old it is. Well, you don't really, because it affects nothing. It has absolutely nothing to do with the value of it. So just enjoy it and the way it is. Don't worry about the age. It's old. You'll get a rough idea. It's between 50 to 150 years old. That's all you really need to know. And nobody can tell you any different. If they do, they're just making it up. I'm telling you now. Unless they can provide provenance, which I have on a couple of ovens, of an actual line of when they were bought new. And it might be 100 years ago, but I've got a couple of ovens like that. I know exactly where they came from. And I know exactly, because the story was passed down, when and where they were bought. So it is interesting to have that provenance, but you're not going to get that on very many ovens. And I'll probably forget those stories with the ovens I own at some stage, and no one will ever know after me. So, it dies with me. So it doesn't really matter. But anyway, that's the anatomy. I've got one more little thing to show you. I just saw it then I realised. I'll do some. I'll zoom in close on these so you can see. But there's another mark here beside the sprue, and there would be, if I look closely, I haven't got my glasses on, but there's probably 3 or 4 of these other little, they're like mini sprues, and what they actually are, they're actually the air vents. So they'd have the sprue where all the hot metal went in to the mould, and the air would have to go somewhere, so we would push out through these air vents and leave a little dag, and that'll get filed off or ground off, but you can still see them somewhere. One more thing. Some camp ovens, I know the Metters have them, yep. I'm not sure if any of the others, I've never really noticed. But I know the Metters, they will have a little lug. 1, 2, 3 little lugs under the lid. Some of them you might find barely noticeable, being worn down or drowned off. And that was so you could actually, if the lid wasn't quite perfect, you could actually grind a little bit off and sink it down one side and so on, and bed that lid in to get it perfect if you like. So that was part of the original design of the lids. Probably gave it a bit of strength too. Anyway, now you know what parts of a camp oven are what.